expert on American public land law and related issues.
You've already heard from me, so I'm not going to take very much time. I just want to underscore 2 or 3 points that John Ruppel made about this state of Utah claim. One thing to underscore is that as a matter of constitutional law, it is terribly muddled. It is really internally inconsistent. It's hard to make sense of. This idea of unappropriated federal lands is not a legal concept that people who deal with federal lands really know anything about. It's never been defined. It's something that's just made up. Utah is making up the idea of unappropriated federal land, saying we're not claiming all of them, we're only claiming the unappropriated ones. Now you ask yourself, why are they doing that? Why aren't they just saying we own them all and not just the unappropriated? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's because politically it would be fatal for Utah to say we own the national parks. They won't say that. They won't say that because the Utah government has, for the last 20 years, trademarked the idea of Utah's mighty 5 national parks, okay? We love our national parks, and Utah can't afford to go into court and say, and by the way, we own them. They're not going to say that. So to avoid saying that, they say we're only going after the unappropriated public lands, whatever that means. Now, no support in constitutional law at all. Since the Civil War, the Supreme Court of the United States has decided a whole bunch of cases about the scope of Congress's power under the Property Clause. And since the Civil War, the Supreme Court has always said the scope of Congress's power under the Property Clause is unlimited. It's not limited by the courts. It's whatever Congress decides. That's what power it has. Now, Utah wants to upend that. In fact, a unanimous Supreme Court decision in 1976 said the power of Congress over the public lands is without limitations, okay? 1976 unanimous Supreme Court decision, consistent with all the other Supreme Court decisions since the Civil War. There is only one case in United States Supreme Court history, going back to the Revolutionary War, where the Supreme Court has ever said that the power of Congress under the Property Clause is limited. That case was a case you might have heard of. It's called Dred Scott versus the United States. It is widely regarded by virtually every constitutional law scholar as the absolute worst decision in Supreme Court history, where the Supreme Court just made up the concept that the Property Clause does not give Congress the power to decide whether slavery can exist in the territories or not. And the Supreme Court invented this idea that Congress doesn't have the power to do that the Property Clause is limited. That decision is so embarrassing that the Supreme Court has never overruled it, but it's never mentioned it since the Civil War. It literally is an embarrassment. Utah, that's the only precedent Utah could cite in this case to support its position. It doesn't cite it. Why? Because it's so embarrassing. It's such a terrible decision and has such a terrible reputation that Dred Scott doesn't really get cited. The last point is this. What Utah is arguing in this case is profoundly undemocratic with a small d. Because what Utah is asking the Supreme Court to do is to say, you, the courts, in fact, you 5 unelected justices of the Supreme Court, shall have the power to decide what public lands are and what Congress can do with them or not do with them, and who really controls the public lands. That won't be a question for Congress. It won't be a question for people we elect to decide those questions. It will be up to the Supreme Court of the United States, to a majority of the Supreme Court of the United States. So they want to take the public land policy generally out of the hands of Congress and the elected representatives, the people we vote for in Congress. Take that power out of the Congress and give it to these unelected justices of the Supreme Court, who will have final authority over what the public lands are, the scope of them, and Congress's power over them. It's really a terrible, terrible policy argument, which is why they don't make it in those terms. So it's all kind of disguised, and it's just sitting there. So I'm going to stop there, and we can have a nice discussion. Thank you.